Hello, and welcome to my channel, The Entrepreneurial Mindset. My name is Jay Berman, and today's presentation is called Essential Management Concepts, Episode 3. The concepts in this video come from my book, Is Your Business Idea a Good Investment? Available on Amazon.com, Kindle version only. Go to the Amazon search bar, select books, type in my name, Jay Berman, scroll to my book to purchase, and by doing so, you support my channel, my work in entrepreneurship and business education. Thank you. So today's essential management concepts, Theory X and Theory Y, psychological contract, managers' expectations of employees, employee expectations of manager, and Maslow's needs hierarchy. So Douglas McGregor, from 1906 to 1964, was greatly influential in management and motivation theory with his 1960 book, The Human Side of Enterprise. And he developed two theories. The first theory was called Theory X, in which managers have a negative view of employees. In other words, they see employees as lazy, unambitious, and uncreative, that people by and large dislike work and will avoid it at all means, at all possible, that people prefer to be controlled in order to avoid responsibility for their own actions, for their own work. People desire security above all else, and that people must be coerced, controlled, and punished in order for an organization or business or firm to be successful. Then you have Theory Y, which managers have a positive view of employees. In other words, people view work as a natural outlet to demonstrate their skills and talents, requiring mental and physical efforts. People prefer autonomy over micromanagement. People respond favorably to rewards when achieving organizational goals and objectives. That people do indeed want to take responsibility for their own actions at work, and that people prefer to use their ambition, their imagination, their ingenuity, and creativity to solve organizational problems and achieve organizational goals. Then there is what we call a psychological contract. These are the expectations of the employer-employee relationship. So what do employees expect? They expect good compensation for the work that they do. They expect to be trained. They expect to be respected at work. They expect opportunities, and they expect a safe work environment. What do employers expect, or managers? Well, they expect employees to come to work with a strong work ethic, to be creative, to be committed to the organization, to the business success, and to be loyal. Now I'm going to do a deeper dive regarding managers' expectations of employees. The first one is attendance and punctuality. Employers expect employees to arrive on time. If they are sick or they're going to be late, managers expect them to notify them, within a reasonable time. They expect a strong work ethic. In other words, they expect their employees to come to work ready to work. In other words, if there's a dress code, if there's a grooming code, that they expect employees not to be tired, to have a good mental attitude regarding their work, and to put in what we call, a full day's work for a full day's pay. They expect competency. In other words, they expect employees to demonstrate their skills and knowledge to complete tasks and projects with minimal supervision. They expect employees to communicate well, which includes writing, speaking, and listening to coworkers, managers, and customers, and particularly no profanity at work. Managers expect efficient employees. In other words, they expect employees to organize their work by prioritizing goals and tasks, to balance competing demands, and to minimize distractions such as being on your cell phone. They expect quality of work. In other words, they expect employees to adhere to the high standards set by the manager for excellence by demonstrating accuracy, thoroughness, and diligence in completing tasks and projects with minimal errors. They expect quantity of work. In other words, to meet productivity standards by completing assigned tasks and projects in a timely manner, especially with regard to deadlines. Managers also expect employees not to be offended by criticism. In other words, employees should accept the feedback from their managers in order to improve their performance and perhaps learn new skills. Employers, or managers expect employees to show some sort of initiative. In other words, that they're willing to take on increased responsibility by requesting or accepting additional projects that require some autonomy. Managers also expect employees to have a good attitude and self-control at work. In other words, demonstrate a positive mental attitude toward coworkers, managers, and customers by displaying a calm demeanor, even during conflicting or stressful situations. In other words, do not express anger at work. On the other hand, there are employee relationship killing behaviors that managers oftentimes demonstrate at work, such as yelling, insulting, swearing, using profanity at employees, particularly in public, lying to employees about future assignments, raises, and promotions, perhaps ignoring or dismissing employees' questions, concerns, complaints, problems, ideas, or suggestions. In other words, gaslighting employees as if they don't exist, making threats to fire and lay off an employee without just cause, tolerating other employees who ignore, argue, swear, or insult other employees, particularly in public, showing favoritism, nepotism in assignments, raises, and promotions, and of course, harassing employees in a sexual manner, which of course is illegal anyway. So how do managers develop and retain an engaged workforce? An engaged workforce is a major problem across any industry in the United States. I read a report that maybe 21% of employees are engaged at work. So it's a major problem in the United States. Many industries have very high turnover because employees are not engaged in work. So the issue is, how can managers develop and retain an engaged workforce? So when you do hire a new employee, managers should train those new employees so they can do their jobs well, mentor new employees so they feel welcomed and integrated into the work environment, provide performance feedback in a positive manner to highlight accomplishments and perhaps recommend improvements, provide career paths and promotion policies, if any. Provide Compensation and benefits such as merit pay, bonuses, commissions, maybe profit sharing, retirement plans such as 401k, and of course insurance such as health, dental, life, vision, and disability. Provides some sort of work balance policy, so employees can help take care of their parents, help take care of their kids, so they have more, have free time after work, and maybe providing family and medical leave policies. Another way employers or managers can help their employees be more engaged in work is perhaps look at their work schedule. And now in this day and age, there are certainly more options for employees to work. It's not strictly 9 to 5 anymore. You can have an employee who works, full time, perhaps at least 30 hours per week. Perhaps they're only interested in working part time, less than 30 hours per week. Maybe have some sort of flex time scheduling where employees work either in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, maybe they work at night, overnight, maybe do weekend shifts. Maybe have a compressed work week, which means you work full time, but in less than 5 days, as opposed to traditional 5 days. Maybe do something like 40 hours a week, and compress those 40 hours in 4 days. So the employee works 10 hours a day instead of 8. Maybe allow the employee to telecommute, which means they can work from home via computer and the internet, or maybe instead of hiring the employee, you can do maybe some sort of self-employment situation, in terms of contracts, gigs, which is a very good if you have temporary assignments and projects. That person would be what we call a contractual employee or contractual worker. So the person is self-employed. You don't have to pay benefits, and the person is basically kind of like an entrepreneur. So they work on projects that are simply temporary or short term. And then there is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is what we call the motivation pyramid. So on the bottom of the pyramid would be physiological needs. So in other words, this is where, people have to first, in order to be engaged at work, they have to earn enough money to pay for living expenses such as housing, food, clothing, etc. If the employee feels that they're not being paid enough to pay for their expenses, they're probably not going to stay with the organization, with the business. If they are being paid enough, then the next up the pyramid is safety needs. In other words, it's important for managers to provide a work environment that's free from potential threats, such as injuries. So making sure the employee is well trained on any equipment that's at work that can be dangerous if not used properly, to prevent crime occurring at work. So making sure the building is secure, particularly if the employee is working at night, and also trying to prevent any violence at work. Then the next level in the pyramid going up is the social needs. Employees need to feel like they're welcomed, that they are welcomed by their managers, by their coworkers, by their colleagues, because work environments, workplaces are kind of like small societies, and people have to feel like they're welcomed and that they're respected. Next up the pyramid is esteem needs. People need to feel like they're being recognized for their hard work. Recognition could be, a raise, could be a bonus, it could be a gift card, it can be an Employee of the Month award, it can be, parking closer to the business, things like that. In other words, people want to feel like they're being recognized. They want to feel like that their contributions are being noticed. And then on top of the pyramid, people have to feel like they're successful in their job and they're successful in their career, which is what we call self-actualization. And that's all I have for today. Any questions or comments, use the comments section below. Subscribe to my channel for more educational content about entrepreneurship. And thank you for watching.